Well, I'm excited to be back, folks. We're going to talk more about Microsoft Cloud and Azure Communication Services. And this is a series, as Vesa just mentioned, that we started last week. So even if you can't catch all these, there's going to be 8 total, I think, sessions, which I'll go through momentarily. You'll still be able to get to the recordings. And, they're only, each demo is like 10, 15 minutes. So it's a great way to quickly learn about things you could do that you might not have jumped into before. And I think there's a ton of applicability in many scenarios to what we're going to talk about here. So my name is Dan Wahlin. I'm with the Cloud Advocacy Group. And what we're going to be talking about throughout this series, I've been working with my colleague, aka.ms, who she will be joining us. I'll be here next week, and then week after that, she'll join. And she'll be doing a couple sessions as well. So as mentioned, this is kind of a multi-part series. We started off by talking about audio and video calling from a custom app into a Teams meeting and just really ran a demo. I'm going to show you that again. So if you missed it, no worries. But today we're going to focus more on the ACS side and how we can actually use that to get started. And so if you haven't heard of ACS, Azure Communication Services, this is literally using the same infrastructure that we're using right now with Teams. And so we'll talk about how you can actually embed this type of functionality into your own apps and some of the scenarios that you can do with that. Now, just as a quick review of what's coming, so I'll be here next week as well, for good or for bad again. But I'm going to talk next week about, this week we're going to focus on how do you get started with it. Next week, we'll actually switch to an app. It's going to be a React app, but these are web components that we're going to be talking about later. And you could use them anywhere the web runs. So we'll talk about that. Aicha will join us to talk about Azure functions and how we can dynamically use Microsoft Graph there to set up a meeting for this type of scenario. She'll also talk about Azure functions and getting tokens to ACS, because there is some user identity and a token you need, and you're going to see that today, actually. And then I'll be back to wrap up on some deployment options to Azure. So the nice thing with this series is, while we're going to have some Microsoft 365, we're going to have some Azure, we're going to put it all together, though. And I'll give you a link at the end of the session on a tutorial that you can go through that's hands-on. And so it's a great way to learn if you're interested. All right, so in part 2 today, I'm really going to mostly jump into the Azure portal, and then I'm going to show you something called UI components and a nice little web page we have set up where you can actually try out what I'm going to demo today without any code, actually. I'll show you what I mean here. All right, so this is actually what we're going to look at building. So this app allows a customer to actually make a face-to-face call, audio-video call with customer service or some other scenario. Last time I joked that I had an AC guy over and he needed to call back to headquarters and this would work. So what'll happen is you could have like a customer service rep who could join a call. We're going to do that here. This is Aicha. And Aicha now joined, and then it'll go back to me. She's going to admit me into the lobby. Notice she was in Teams, by the way, or she is in Teams right here. And then I am just in a regular custom app. In fact, that's what I would see from the customer viewpoint. So very much like what we're doing right now, again, with Teams, but you can actually do this yourself in any custom app that runs the web. So the general building blocks of this are the following. You'll notice that we have React there in the middle. And again, it could be any front-end app. It could be JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever you want to do. But we have Azure Communication Services, and we're going to talk about that part today. It calls into Azure Functions to integrate with setting up meetings, and there's a couple ways you can actually do that we'll talk about later. And then, of course, we're calling into Teams. Now, with ACS, you don't have to call into Teams. You could actually have an app call another app. So if, Michelle was in the custom app and I'm in the custom app, we could actually talk one-to-one, or you can even do one-to-many. Very neat type of setup. So that's kind of where we're at. And then today, I'm going to then focus right in here. Let me go to the next slide here, right there to the Azure Communication Services side, and that'll get us to what we're going to do. So with that, let me show you how you would get started with this. So on the left, you'll see I have the Azure portal. No surprises there. And then on the right, I have my Microsoft 365 developer tenant going. And I'm just logged in as a fake me, actually. Up here, you'll see. Apparently, I'm available, even though I'm presenting, because it's in a different tenant. But what I'm going to do is show you, like, how would you get started with this? And how could you actually try it with zero code on your part? And what I'll show you at the end of this is, I think it's pretty compelling, pretty neat to work with. And I'll show you some other things you can do outside of just audio video calling. So let's jump on in. So the first thing is you would need to create an Azure Communication Services resource. All right. Now, I've done it enough that it just shows up, but obviously we can come on up, type communication, and then communication services shows up. So let's go ahead and do that. I already have one. I'm going to create one from scratch. If it takes too long to set up, I'll just use this one for the demo, but we're going to try to do it from scratch here and see how it goes. Now, let me switch real quick to a different resource group, kind of my bucket where I want to put this if you're new to it. And I'm going to give it a name of, let's just call it ACS M365 call. Now, data location, this is, you can actually get information about the calls and other features of ACS that are made. And so data location isn't so much about like where the calls are going to be made, so much as where is the data from that going to be made. So if you want to get like metrics information, where do you want that stored? So I'm just going to leave where I am. And let's go ahead, and that all looks pretty good. So let's review and create. It should validate here in just a moment. And then once it validates, and there we go, it should create. And normally it takes, I don't know, 45 seconds, maybe something like that. It depends on the day, but we'll let it do its thing. Now, while this is setting up, I want to show you how you can get started with this. So you'll notice on this page, I'm just in our normal learn.microsoft.com. And if you just go search for Azure Communication Services, it's really easy to find. And then we have some common scenarios in here. We have samples, those type of things. In fact, there's a video on how to get started from a really high level overview, even higher than I'm going to go today. But what I want to mention while this is kind of creating the resource over here is that while we're going to focus on voice and video calling, you can set up chat. In fact, you could even have voice and video calling with chat, just like Teams chat, by the way. You could send SMS text messages, or you could send email. So pretty much any communication functionality you could do once you set up this resource I'm now setting up in the Azure portal. In fact, it's not mentioned right here quite as much, but you'll notice down here, you can actually acquire phone numbers, and not only can you do SMS texting, but you can even make phone-to-phone type calls. So I could have an app that actually calls someone's phone. You could do telephony with this. So a lot of really cool scenarios here that in the past would have been super hard to do. Now, the thing I wanted to point out, though, is if we come on down, you're going to notice a link here to ui-library. I mentioned earlier that once you get this set up, you can actually get started with zero code. Of course, some of you are going, I mean, come on, Dan, what's the fun in that? We got to have code. And we will. Next week, we'll get into that. But, you know, sometimes you just want to try something out before you invest all that time to start your app. Well, this UI library will let you do that. And that's what we're going to use here in just a moment. I already have it open. But this is if you've heard of Storybook, I love Storybook, by the way. It's a way to do things like UI testing scenarios, but you can also use it for just demoing components. And you'll notice here on the left, we have these things called composites. Now, a composite is really just like, it's kind of like a Lego set with a bunch of Legos that have already been put together for you. They've been composed, if you will, into a web component that you can just kind of drop into your app and you get all this functionality. So if you think about making a call, like look at this screenshot right here, you know, you have the video stream, you have the ability to pick the camera, you have the toolbar to hang up and, you know, enable camera and all that stuff we're used to in Teams, for example. You could have chat up here. You'll notice some of that. You might have the people in the call. So anyway, there's a lot of, you know, pieces, and all of those are down here in the UI components. But sometimes you're just like, I just want to make a call. I don't want to worry about putting all the pieces together. Just give me a Lego set that I can just drop in my app and I can just use it. Well, that's what we're going to learn about today. In fact, we're going to go into this one called the call composite. And we're going to do the join existing call because I'm going to try to join into a Teams call, just like you saw in the video demo there. All right. So let's see where we're at. Looks like it's complete. That is good news. This thing is totally overtaking my screen, but let's go to resource because I'm kind of zoomed in here. All right. So this is my ACS resource. That's how easy it is to set up. Now, if I want to demo this, though, back here, my goal is I want to go to this join existing call preview, but notice that it requires some properties down here. We need a user identifier for the person making the call. We need a token, display name. Now, that one I'll change to me. And then in this case, because I'm going to call into Teams, we need a way to do the Teams meeting link. Now, you'll notice there's some other options. You can even call into a room that already has a meeting set up, and you can call into a group with ACS. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do. We're going to do this one, the Teams meeting link. So what I'm going to do is come on over to Teams here, and I'm just going to set up a really quick call. We'll call it test call because I'm so creative for, today. Let's go ahead and save that. It's really all we need to do. And then if we click on it, we know that we can come on in and, oh, I must not have done, well, actually, that's interesting. Let me edit this because it apparently did not set up. Let me try that again. It did not set up my Teams for some reason. Interesting. Let's try that again. Might just have to join it and then get it from there. Okay. It might be because I'm so used to doing the dog food version that I switched last night to this version. So let me make sure I'm not missing something here that I'm not used to seeing. I think we're good. All right, let's try that again. And okay, I think it's just because, let me move it up. I think it's just because of the time. It's not, I still have like 5 minutes until that. All right, let's try that. I think that's probably what it is. So let's do test call. Keep capitalizing that. Let's save it. And yeah, interesting. It is not letting me do it right now. Okay, well, I might have to do it a different way, like do a new meeting, and I'll still be able to show you. So that's okay. Yeah, normally I'm used to you click on it, you can get the link right here, and I don't know why it's not letting me do that right now. So that's okay, though. What we're going to do is I want to call into a meeting. I might just do a new meeting on my own and grab the link, since I'm apparently failing at this approach. But what I want to do is I need an access token and a user ID. We already have the display name. So here's what you can do in ACS. If I come on over, you're going to notice first off, there's keys. We don't need it for this demo, but once you get to the application part, you would need the connection string here. Okay, so I just want to point that out. We're not going to use that today, but we would use it later in a more realistic scenario. Now, coming on down to here, notice I have identities and user tokens, and this is a great feature because instead of me having to go build an app, somehow call into ACS to get a token, get a user identity so that this can work, I can actually just do this. I could say, hey, I'm going to do voice and video calling. Please generate a short-term token and user identity. And then if I want to do chat, we could do that too. I'm not going to do chat today, but we could do that. So I'm going to hit generate, and what this gives me is a user identity and a token. So let me go ahead and copy these real quick. We're going to come on back, and here's the user identity. Here's the user token. And by the way, notice these expire. You basically get 24 hours. So you can use these temporarily, but then they're going to expire. All right, there's the token. Now, the last thing I need is the call locator. All right, notice this hasn't lit up yet. I don't have a UI at this point. Now, again, for some reason, this one's not cooperating for me. So, all right, let me try just new meeting here. And let's do a meet now. Let's do get link to share. start meeting. I'm going to do allow, but I'm going to turn off. All right, let's make sure to turn off my mic because I'll get a feedback loop. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and paste in that Teams meeting link over here. That's kind of what I was trying to do with the calendar. And notice what happens. This now lights up. Pretty cool. Now this is the camera I'm on right now. So let me switch to maybe this camera, which is over here. And let me turn this on. And in just a sec, there we go. So you saw me do something like this last week for those that were here, but now we're just doing it again. It's like, look, Mom, no code. Pretty awesome. So I'm not going to turn on my mic because that could cause weird things, but I'll leave this camera on and we'll pretend I'm talking this way. You all get the idea. And now we can come on in and start the call from here. What should happen is I should get a little admit into, I got to join. Hold on. Let's join. And we should get admit to lobby. There we go. In fact, I could copy the meeting link that way, of course, but let's admit. And we should be in now. All right. And there we go. So now you can see me. I'm now in, and I wrote no code to do this because I'm just able to use these web components in this UI library kind of setup. Pretty cool. Now, there's a couple things I want to show you here, though, before we wrap up. So let me leave this. We'll leave this one. All right. So over here on the left, you'll notice that in addition to what I just did, if I go to basic example and preview, we could do the same thing, but we could actually do it from like an ACS to ACS. In other words, I don't have to have Teams in the mix. Or if I want a one-to-many type, there's an example of how we could do that. If you have one-to-many people, like a webinar type setup. Pretty neat. And then I'll just show you a couple of the other things you can do. You can even do chat. Here's an example of kind of what it looks like. It's very Teams looking, actually. And what this will allow us to do is we could actually set up a call and a chat, or you could just have chat. In fact, you'll notice right up top here, there's a call with chat composite. And here, now you're going, whoa, that really looks like Teams, right? Because you have the calling, you have the people, and then you have the chat. And you don't have to write all that. You just have to get the, well, I'll go to the preview here. You just have to get the user identifier, the token, and then there is an endpoint you'd have to get, which, by the way, I can go back to keys, and we can get that from right here. Here's the endpoint right there. So if you want to play around with this, that's all you'd have to do is just go to the Azure portal. Even if you don't have a subscription currently, just go get the trial one. And you can now set up an ACS resource. Very quick to do it. And then from there, for most of these demos, you would just go to the user tokens. If you want to do the chat, you would, of course, check chat. And you could check both, by the way. Generate those and then just copy and paste those into the UI. So to wrap up here, that's kind of the main demo I wanted to show for today. So next week, what I'm going to be doing is saying, okay, that's nice, but that's not in my app, Dan. So next week, we're going to take a look at what we can do with React in this case. And again, it could be anything that runs JavaScript. And I'll show you how we can plug in this exact same type of functionality, but into a custom React app. That's what we'll go into. So in the meantime, to wrap up here, if you're interested in not only learning about this scenario, but others, we have some resources. As soon as I'm done, I'll copy this into the chat for you. But you can go to this aka.ms link. But the tutorial that I just went through, including setting up the resource, can be found in the second link here. And then you can get to the code in this repo. Now, the Azure Communication Services UI library, there's also a shortcut link for you there. And like I said, I'll paste these in momentarily. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to get to our next demo here. But I hope that gives everybody a pretty good idea about what you can do with zero code. And then come on back next week, and we'll talk about how you can actually start get started with the code. So thank you. We'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So does the zero code mean no code in this case? Just to ask the question.
Yeah.
But really, really cool. By the way, I have to say all credits for the ACS team, so the Azure Communication team, as they provided those controls. So, of course, behind the scenes, they're using Microsoft Graph APIs and all of that thing. But having those controls abstracting the API surface makes life super easy for developers.